Hello, and welcome to my video. So in this video, I'm going to be reviewing Unravel 2 and finding out if you should put money towards this game. Should you buy it? Should you not buy it? Let's find out. So, I didn't play the first Unravel game in its entirety, so I might be missing some elements here and all there, so bear with me. So this game starts out with the first Yarn character out at sea, and he eventually makes his way towards land, which you find out has another Yarn character inside a suitcase. We find out at this instance of the game, you can play as two characters instead of one. This can create some interesting interactions between these two. If the game was poorly designed, the two characters wouldn't have any interesting interactions between each other, but I'll talk about that later. So the game begins properly after you get the second Yarn character, and here you begin to find out that you can pick him up and use all sorts of mechanics, like switching between characters and have one of the Yarn characters in place while the other one can be swinging just below. It creates an interesting dynamic in the game and is definitely a very welcome one, and has very fluid controls for both of these characters in the game. All the mechanics between these two characters are great because they are fluid and work well between each other. The level design in this game is very intriguing to me, and I really think the level design in its simplest form is amazing. The visuals of the backgrounds at certain points is visually interesting to me. But the level design itself and its challenges are very simple, but how does the player mechanics between the two characters hold up? Well, as I said, they are fluid, but when you get to a certain point in the game where you need to use both of them, the mechanics between each one of them is interesting to use and can be quite clever. But my only criticism of the game is it doesn't offer very much difficulty in the story aspects of the game. The game has local co-op in the game, so it could be fun if you have another person to play the game with. I personally think that games should be challenging before they get to the extra stuff like challenge modes, etc. But this game doesn't do that, and it's very noticeable. Since most of the levels are very quick to get through, it's not really entirely possible to get 100% stuck for long periods of time, which could mean that the player playing the game or players could get very bored and can mean a breaking point of the game itself. So I've talked a little about the level design and mechanics, but I want to go more in depth with their implementation and design. The mechanics that the player has and how the game explains it to the player is good enough to the point that the player should understand how to use all of the mechanics in the game. The mechanics that the player has is yarn swinging, which can use the two characters instead of one, wall jumping, wall climbing, and all the other mechanics the game explains to you in the very first level. As well as in the single player aspects of the game, having one of the yarn characters hang on something, then switching out and having him hang there or whatever the player wanted the character to do, as well as being able to pick up the other yarn character. The level interactions in the game is interesting, but it's still very simple. Like for example, in the levels, the player might need to use both characters at some point, but this doesn't necessarily make it more difficult, which is a missed opportunity to make it more complex. In the levels, there are certain objects and enemies. The objects in the levels are used for various reasons, but they have very simple purposes in the game, which is good, but this doesn't make the game more harder. The game has enemies in the game, like the black looking things that move around, as well as certain ones like the turkey and fish. The enemies in the game have very simple mechanics, but they do not overstay their welcome. One of the enemy types, the black orb things, also have variations in behavior, but very little. Like one of them, which only goes backwards and forwards, and then just one that adds like 3 of them on top of each other. And then there's the one that follows you around, etc. All the enemies aren't designed poorly, but they are very simplistic in their design. In my conclusion, the game doesn't offer very much in challenge in the main levels of the game. A lot of the game is visuals while the rest lacks in real challenge and is very simplistic at heart. The rest of the game involves doing speed runs and no death challenges. The game does have extra content like the challenges as well as the paintings, but they only add artificial challenge as they are also very simplistic for a platforming game. If you like a game that isn't very challenging until having another person to play a game with, then I recommend this game.